Hello, and welcome to the Yearbooking Report podcast, an independent resource for yearbook advisors and staffs across America and beyond. I'm Scott Giese, and for some folks out there, you may have heard or watched the video version of our report in the past. Back then, this was a feature that I produced as a 25-year sales and service representative for one of the major yearbook publishing companies in the country. I created it essentially for my own advisor friends in the area that I covered throughout central and northern Pennsylvania. Since that time, I've left that job. But my career is in journalism and writing, of which Yearbook, of course, was a part. So in 2025, I've decided to continue the Yearbooking Report feature, but now as an independent, not tied to any particular yearbook company. My hope is that this monthly podcast feature will offer you ideas from top yearbook advisors and experts from across the country. And for any yearbook advisors and staffs out there, from elementary school all the way up to the college level. Now, you may know that the Yearbooking Report is also a free weekly e-newsletter feature during the school year, with two different versions, one for high school and college, the other for elementary and middle school, a bit different on each. We'll have ideas, inspiration, examples, and a little humor tossed in, something that we hope any yearbook advisor and staff will find valuable. No subscription rate here. It's all free for advisors who wish to sign up. Look for the links to sign up for either newsletter version at our website, yearbookingreport.com. Also on the site, we have video lessons from yours truly on basic yearbook topics. Please feel free to use them with your students or staffers. But also, we have some videos there that are a bit different on subjects that are tied to our yearbook work. These are videos and topics you probably won't find from any yearbook company. Some very useful and timely topics covered. Fact-filled and thought-provoking, we hope you learned something from those videos, as well as some of the other features on our website. Again, that's yearbookingreport.com. Okay, in this episode of the Yearbooking Report podcast, we start a new school year by talking with Gary Lundgren. He is the Associate Director for NSPA, the National Scholastic Press Association, based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. You can check out their website at studentpress.org/NSPA. Gary has a national view of student journalism and the yearbook world, and he happens to be an old acquaintance of mine. In this episode, we discuss Gary's views on what makes a great yearbook at any level, what can be improved in many yearbooks, as well as the state of student journalism today. Get ready for some great ideas and some views that are going to make you think. So let's get started as we meet Gary. Well, first off, let me welcome Gary Lundgren from NSPA to the Yearbooking Report podcast. Gary, first off, appreciate your time today and thank you for joining me.
I'm happy to be here.
Now, we'll call this a transparency alert. Years ago, Gary and I used to work for the same yearbook company. That's kind of ancient history. But we're going to talk about some really, I think, absolutely good information for the start of a school year. And Gary, you've been around for a very long time. So let's start actually with that question, all right? If you would tell us about yourself, sort of, biography of sorts. What is your background with journalism? What is your background with yearbook? Again, you're with NSPA for folks who may not exactly know what that is. So let's start with some background. Gary, tell us about yourself, please.
Awesome. Like so many people, I got involved with student publications and journalism when I was a high school student. I started working on the yearbook and the newspaper at a small school in northern Idaho. And like so many high school journalism kids, I kind of discovered my thing. I certainly liked the design aspect and, became a journalism major in college, and I worked on my college yearbook and newspaper. And I also served as an advisor for 10 years at the University of Arkansas, and I worked 20 years at a yearbook company. And so I had an opportunity about 7 years ago to joined the staff of the National Scholastic Press Association, which is a nonprofit organization serving high school and college journalism students, publications advisors, and student media. And I really was intrigued by that idea. And after working, at a yearbook company for 20 years, which was an awesome experience, working for a nonprofit, I kind of thought would be a cool thing kind of at the end of my career to kind of go back into education. And so it's really been a perfect fit for me. And I've really enjoyed working at NSPA. So it's really hard to believe that, this many years has passed by since I walked into room 57 at Moscow High School and started working on the yearbook. But it's been a great run. There's never a dull day.
Yeah, Gary and I are both 39 years old, so you folks
Exactly.
play around with that, all right? Have some, the old Jack Benny gig or something. Now, NSPA, a little bit more about NSPA. I mean, how many members do you have, or how many schools are you involved with? What exactly does NSPA do?
Our membership is by media outlets. So at a school, a yearbook, a newspaper, a website, a broadcast, or a literary arts magazine can become a member of NSPA. And so at some schools, there are maybe 5 NSPA members at that school. And we also have a college division called Associated Collegiate Press. And then we also operate the Minnesota High School Press Association. So we do a number of things for our members. I mean, we provide contests and critiques, which kind of fosters that improvement on a year-by-year basis to get a critique and feedback. At many schools, recognition is important. A successful program, we all like to be recognized, and recognition also helps these programs build. There's a big education component. We sponsor 2 national conventions a year. We jointly sponsor them with the Journalism Education Association. And so there's a huge education component there. And so, every school has different needs. So we try to meet all of those needs. But basically, we provide education and recognition for student media at both the high school and the college level.
All right, now, Gary, be honest with me, okay?
Okay.
I was a yearbook representative for 25 years, and I've
Yep.
been a journalist since I was in high school. So that's a long
Yep.
time ago. And occasionally I would talk about maybe NSPA, JEA. I've been to events and so on. And sometimes if I would talk to advisors about this, the vibe that I got a lot was, well, those organizations are only for the really top level schools, just for everybody else. Nah, not really. Gary, is that true? All right. I mean, in other words, with your outreach, who are you trying to reach when it comes to not just yearbook, for all student journalism efforts across the country? Is it just the top level folks, or is it really anybody?
Well, I would say that different programs at different levels have different needs. And I think really the 2 population groups that we serve the best are advisors and students that are building their program. And they really are often the ones that they're usually the ones that will say, we're not ready for that. We're not ready for competition. We're not ready to have a critique. Or, oh no, I won't send my publication in for a critique. I'm not ready for people to see that yet. Well, with our mission, those programs at that very beginning stage, I think, are the ones that we really can serve the most, because, every year you need to improve. And so we can help you with that journey. And so, when I look back when I was in high school, we sent our newspaper and yearbook in the first time, and they were absolutely awful. But we didn't have any unrealistic expectations about what the quality was. We just sent it in and got a critique and did it the next year, and just it was just part of the routine. So building that program, I think an organization like NSPA can be very helpful. Certainly, programs at the very high end benefit a lot also, because those established programs are the very schools that have built a program to the point that they'll go to a national convention. And their publications and their broadcasts and websites are highly competitive. And so they're kind of at a different league. And I think an organization like NSPA serves their needs also, but I think their needs are a little different than someone that's starting to build a program. So we try to cater to all those audience groups. And so, different programs have different needs. And, advisors come from different backgrounds, as you well know also. So there are some advisors that have journalism background. There are advisors that really are art teachers or English teachers and don't come from a journalism background. So, we try to offer something for everyone. And so, and we fully understand that there are some schools that budgets are an issue, or there just isn't an interest there. And that's okay too. So, we try to offer something for everyone.
I tell you, Gary, I've been to a national convention and I am blown away at the number of people who attend these. And you folks, again, you have two of them, not one. You have
Yep.
two of them I think one's in April and one's in November.
Yep.
And I'm walking around like, wow, there's a lot of people here. I mean, how do you draw that many people? I would understand maybe one a year. This is two a year, and tons of people show up for this. If
Yep.
obviously there will be one upcoming, maybe why should a school or a group attend if it happens to be maybe close to them, so to speak? Why should they attend a convention? What would they get out of it?
Our conventions are a tremendous educational opportunity. To be able to go to keynote speeches and instructional classes for 3 days to learn from the best is just a phenomenal educational opportunity. It's also a great opportunity to explore and go travel. I think a staff going on a trip, there's a lot of learning that goes on there, exploring a city, going on a trip. I mean, many students, when they come to our convention, at their high school students in particular, it might be the first time they've ever traveled, on an airplane, or been to a big city. And so, there's just so much learning to be done there. I often like to suggest advisors, if they think they would like to check out a national convention, you don't have to bring 30 students the first year. In fact, I suggest to many advisors that they just come on their own one year and use it as their own professional development and learning experience, and kind of understand how the convention works, and maybe bring some students in the future. But, part of the reason the conventions are large, there's 2,000 to 5,000 students, depending on the location, is it's a national convention. And so, there are some schools that bring 20, 30, or 40 students. And so, when a school brings, let's say, 30 students, the numbers build up pretty quickly. So it's just a very educational, high energy place to be. And it's very inspirational.
All right. Now, before we wrap up later, we'll share, NSPA, your website, how people can join, and so on. We'll save that for a little bit later on. All right. Let's talk some yearbook here, because I'm really curious to get your views. Again, you mentioned you worked 20 years for a yearbook company, but that was a few years ago. Now you're doing national stuff for NSPA. So I'm very curious for your points of view here. First off, let's start with this one. Just sort of, I don't know, in general, from your experience. What is the state of yearbooking today? I call it yearbooking, doing yearbook work. What your view? What is the state of yearbooking today? Is it healthy? Is it vibrant? Is it maybe struggling? Because, especially ever since COVID, we've had these stories about education and challenges and all the different things that people are pulling their hair out over and so on when it comes to schools today. What about yearbooking? Doing well? Struggling? What do you think? What's your answer there?
Yearbooks are absolutely alive and well. And I say that with a smile. I think so many of us have had a big impact on that, whether we're advisors, we've worked for companies, we've worked for a press association. And I think that a defining moment for yearbooks was the pandemic. There were people that thought, oh my goodness, this is going to kill yearbooks, because we were kind of worried about that before the pandemic because of technology and the fact that students have so many photos and technology on their phone and they have videos. And I think the pandemic taught us that the yearbook is alive and well. And coming out of the pandemic, sales stayed pretty stable. And so I am pretty confident in saying that if yearbooks were going to die, they would have died. But I think in our high-tech world today, where kids have a million videos and photos on their phone, the yearbook is so old school that it's cool. To be able to have a book with photos and copy about you and your friends, I think it's pretty cool. And so I would say that certainly yearbooks have challenges like anything else, but I would pronounce the state of yearbooks in 2025 to be pretty healthy.
Old school is cool. Oh, Gary,
Yep.
you've warmed my heart. All right. Thank you very much. You said the right sentence there. But all right, let me, this might be a bit of an odd question. All right. Again, you and I have been at this for a long time.
Yep.
And back in the day, there were, I'm going to call it a small number of yearbook publishing companies. There were, I won't say a hand, well, it kind of was a handful, really. I mean, it was pretty close. Today, I mean, the last time, Gary, that I tried counting, I think I counted at least 15 different American companies that produce school yearbooks. I mean, there's a ton of them now, and that number may be growing. Gary, from your perspective, all right, old school is cool. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Is that good or bad? Because there's way more competition now than there was back when you and I were both younger. All right. In other words, we had fewer competitors to deal with. Now there's a whole lot of them. Now, I don't know, is that good or is that bad from your perspective? What do you think?
Well, I think in the marketplace, competition's good. It doesn't matter what your industry is. I think that's a good thing. When I look back, even when I started working at a yearbook company, which would have been now 28 years ago, there were perhaps 15 yearbook companies out there. Make no mistake, there were 4 big or maybe 5 big national companies, but there were others that were very regional players, the Hunters and the Delmars of the world. And over the course of time, the bigger companies bought those out. And so, I remember when there were 15 yearbook companies. But the one thing that's changed along the way is the internet, and different schools have different needs. And so there definitely is a segment of the market that just prefers to work with a company online. And so I think that's where all the competition has come. But I think it's also speaks well for the yearbook business. There wouldn't be that many yearbook companies if it was a dying product. So I think that competition's good. And, while I haven't researched all of the yearbook companies that are in existence online, I will say, and this is an observation I've made throughout my career, the major yearbook companies really, really do care about yearbooks and educators and students. And they serve their customers very well. And so I think the cool thing about having so many yearbook companies out there now is it allows schools to find the perfect fit for them. And for some schools, the perfect fit for them is dealing with a website, not a rep. And so they have options now. And I think that's a good thing, a really good thing.
We'll get back to more with Gary Lundgren of the NSPA coming up in just a bit. as we dig deeper into good yearbooking, including a question on using AI, artificial intelligence, with yearbook work. Now, some folks simply will not go there, but AI isn't going away. What does Gary think? Well, we'll have that in just a moment. Now, in some future episodes of the Yearbooking Report podcast, we may have messages here from sponsors, yearbook companies or publishing companies, maybe businesses dealing with education. Yeah, we got to pay the bills, folks, so we'll see what happens in the future. In the meantime, here, let's do a commercial of sorts for what should be covered in every yearbook, and yet it's rarely done in most cases, and that is simply covering the first day of school. Now think about it. Day one is one of the biggest days of the entire school year. Everybody's back, essentially. Excitement is at an all-time high. Maybe friendships are renewed. You get to meet new teachers and students. And yet my experience has been most yearbook staffs never give this a thought. No pictures, no information, no coverage. One of the biggest days of the year, and it's totally missed. Let's see if we can change that this year. First, if you're listening here, depending on the timing, and you haven't had day one yet, start making your plans now. Who can take pictures as people arrive that morning? Can staffers take pictures during that school day? And don't forget about that first lunchtime in the cafeteria. For brand new students, that can be rather enlightening. Who can get some images of new teachers? Some shots of them in action on day one. Now, most schools won't allow this now, but see if you can get admin permission for this special use. Can you get folks to use their phones on day one? Or just have your yearbook cameras charged, memory cards cleaned, all ready to go. One of our simple TYR rules on photography is take a ton of photos, not just a few. Yes, most of those will probably be garbage, and that's normal. Just delete them later. But somewhere in that mountain of photos, gonna be some real gems. Now, if you're checking us out maybe a bit later, day one has already happened, and unfortunately you missed it, we bet somebody around school took at least a few images. All right, those teachers we mentioned, check with them about shots maybe they took in their class on the first day. Especially with younger students, what about parents who may have snapped some images? If your school has a public relations person, we are sure that they took some photos. Reach out to all of these people to gather as many images as you can, and then dedicate maybe a page, maybe a spread, maybe just part of a page to day one of the new school year, which is again a day not to be forgotten. All right, now let's get back to our conversation with Gary Lundgren of the NSPA, digging more into really good yearbooking for anybody out there, right here on the Yearbooking Report. Let's talk about books in particular. All right.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that we may have a lot of people listening or watching that are rookie advisors, second year. In other words, they've just started this recently. And from the time that we worked together years ago, Gary, I always valued your information, a lot of creative, great ideas and so on. So let's start with just sort of a general question here. In your opinion, maybe especially as an NSPA member, okay, what makes for a great yearbook? In other words, if somebody says, I want to make a great yearbook this year, what are the elements that should be in that book that if they put it in for judging and so on, or even if they didn't do that, these are the things that a really good yearbook sort of needs to have? What would be on your list for that?
I would begin by saying I think a good yearbook has to meet the needs of its school and its community. I will admit up front that I'm biased because I work at a press association and I'm a journalist and I'm a journalism major. So I definitely am in the group of people that think that a yearbook should be a journalistic publication. Another reason for that is in many schools, academic credit is awarded for working on this publication. So it has to cover the year in a responsible journalistic way. With that in mind, I think that a good yearbook needs to provide very comprehensive coverage. You need to look at your school and look at the demographics of your school, the makeup of the student population, and then look at the book and go, does our product really reflect the student population of our school? Because I think that's very important, that it really reflects and covers the entire school. A couple of other things that I believe are fundamentally important is I think a good yearbook needs to have captions that tell us what's going on in the photograph. I'll give you an example. My high school class reunion just happened last weekend, and I didn't go. But I saw group shots and photos posted online from the reunion. And I would look at those photos and go, who are these people? I don't even recognize them. And so I think it's really important that that yearbook become a time capsule and you have captions. A lot of contemporary yearbooks have quite a bit of copy, but that depends on your needs at your school. But if you're doing a good job as a yearbook journalist, we'll be able to go back and look at that book in 10 or 15 years and find out what was going on in the world, what was happening at the school. And so I think that's really important. I also think that it's really important that a yearbook have outstanding photography. People might not be able to recognize passive voice or poorly written copy. But everyone can tell a good photograph. So I think good photography is at the heart and soul of a great yearbook. And then, I think a good yearbook has to have some creativity involved with it. It kind of needs to look like the year. It should look like 2026. It shouldn't look like, 1990. And so I think it really has to kind of have a personality and a style reflecting the school and the year. And, that all kind of comes together in a fun, creative book. But I think the most important thing to remember is a yearbook is telling a journalistic story, and you're writing the history of the year. And if it's not in that book and it's not captured, it's not recorded. So that's a pretty exciting responsibility. And will require some good photos and stories to get that done.
All right. Now, for any students that might be either watching or listening,
Yep.
trust Gary, trust me, 15, 20, 25 years from now, you will forget so many things, and you will see people, like you said, Gary, 20 whatever years, 25, 30 years later, and you're like, who's that?
Yep.
I've been to a class reunion or two, and I'm like, who's that over there? Is that really, that's the Hellraiser guy. Oh, really?
Yeah.
He doesn't look like that anymore. It's amazing how people change. Gary, let me toss out this word, all right? And it's simply the word journalism, because so many times in my career, you throw out that word and that's a big word and people really either don't understand it or it's just overwhelming, like, oh, this is beyond me. I can't do this. Your simple definition, what is journalism? So many times, Gary, I've heard it referred to journalism and yearbook. I'm like, no, 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 no.
No.
They're the same thing. What's your response to that?
Journalism is good storytelling, responsible storytelling with words and photos. It doesn't need to be an intimidating word. I've noticed journalism is a word that a lot of organizations are trying to downplay. There are a lot of collegiate journalism departments that have taken the word journalism out of the name, and they're now, the College of Mass Media or Media Studies. But, journalism at its heart and soul is telling accurate stories with words and photos. And that's pretty cool.
All right. Let me follow up a little bit on that. All right.
Okay.
Again, for folks tuning in here, either if they're sort of a rookie or they've been at this 10, 15, 20 years and so on, again, as we start a new school year, some simple, and you've kind of touched on these a little bit, simple things that if folks just did this, they would immediately improve the quality of their yearbook. I don't know, 2, 3, 4 things that right off the bat, do this, you're going to have a better yearbook. What would be on your do this list?
Shoot a lot of photos, a lot of photos. You can't take too many pictures. Pictures are at the heart and soul of any publication, especially a yearbook, and take a lot of pictures. The other thing that I think is really important is to plan the stories that you're going to cover. Start at the beginning of the year and brainstorm for topics that you might not have put in the yearbook before. So you're not covering the same old thing year after year after year. There are some things that are going to be in the book year after year. You're probably going to have homecoming this year, like you have for the last 100 years. I'm thinking you're going to have graduation. You might need to cover that. So all of these things that happen every year, you definitely need to cover that. But I think you need to ask yourself, is there a new angle or a new approach we can use for those? But then in terms of feature stories, try to come up with some things that you haven't covered in the book before. I think that's really, really important. Look at your writing. I think, if you're out to improve the quality of the writing, I definitely would start with captions there. But I think sit down and look at last year's publication, and I think you can easily identify some things that you want to do better.
All right, now, Gary, this might be a sort of a different question, but I've asked this over the past year to some other advisors, experts, and so on.
Yep.
And it's simply, again, you're based in Minneapolis. I don't know how often you get around to schools, either locally or nationally or any of that
Yep.
sort of thing. Are kids just different today? And I don't know if it's a COVID thing or whatever it is. I think there are some teachers that would they're already nodding their heads. Yep, they're really different today. And especially, when it comes to our yearbook work, do we need to, I don't know, handle it differently? Or maybe you think kids are just kids. They're always the same way they've always been. Dealing with a student staff, what do you think about that?
Well, I do think students are different today. Every decade, students change. They transform themselves, um, but in a good way. I do think students today are far more technology savvy than they ever have been. And so I think that's really a good thing for the yearbook because, with photography and design and things being tech savvy, I think is really, really a good thing. One thing that I think has changed with students is, and some of this was a byproduct of COVID, is because of technology and because of, they spent a year or possibly 2 years learning from home. A yearbook is a highly collaborative operation. Yearbook is a team sport. And so a lot of skills come from that because some people just really are the type that just want to sit at the computer or their workspace and work independently. And there's a place for that with yearbooks, but it is a group effort. And so I think because of technology sometimes and our phones and coming out of the pandemic, they oftentimes say that, students right now aren't as social as they used to be. But that's, something working on a publication will help because, it's a team effort. And I think that collaboration is really, really important.
All right, now this might morph interestingly into my next question. And
Okay.
I'm really curious to see your answer on this one. For today, yeah, technology, you mentioned that. For today, what about yearbooking and AI, artificial intelligence? This is a question I've asked for a number of people for over the last 1 to 2 years, and I've
Yep.
gotten differing responses from sort of different corners. But
Yep.
first, AI is not going away. For goodness sakes, it's growing and growing and growing. But when
Yep.
it comes to yearbooking work, for those advisors out there thinking, AI, how can I use this? Should I use this? What do you think about yearbooking and AI? How do those fit together? Or maybe they really don't. What do you think?
Well, we could talk 12 hours about this nonstop. Literally. I think the first thing we have to do is talk about AI. What is it? It's different things to different people. And I think it's very important since yearbooks and journalism are a byproduct of education. that we embrace technology. Technology is our friend, not our enemy. Technology, you can't cheat in Yearbook. You can plagiarize, which we do not want to do. So we have a tremendously powerful tool here that changes daily, probably changes by the minute. So I think the first challenge for teachers and advisors, and this is a big challenge, is to learn as much about AI as possible, to learn what it can do. Because I admit I don't know as much about it as I need to. And so I think we need to just learn as much about AI as possible, recognizing the fact that it's constantly changing. And they always say you need to work smarter, not harder. So I think anytime there's technology out there that could allow you to do a better job, I think you need to learn as much as possible. Now, I think AI works really well with some repetitive type tasks. I think that we don't want it to do our work for us, but it can be a powerful tool. Back in the day, they never would have said, "Oh, don't use spell check. That's cheating." No, that's a helpful tool to help you improve your writing. So how can we use AI as a helpful tool for us to be better journalists? I think we need to avoid AI in instances where we can use it to mislead people. That is an important consideration when we're talking about journalism, because we now have a powerful tool that we can make a video and misrepresent someone and make it look like someone is talking to us and they're not saying things at all. So, AI, where journalism is concerned or the public is concerned, can really, really be used to mislead people. And I think we need to be very, very careful about that. But in terms of some tasks, I think experimenting with it and learning is a cool thing. I know some yearbook staffs that have tested AI to try to write yearbook captions. I think that's fascinating. If I had time, I would try that. I'm not sure I would use it to write yearbook captions, but I want to check on it. And I think the scenario in which the yearbook is produced has a lot to do with what you would allow AI to do. If you have a small staff of 4 students that work after school and volunteer to do the yearbook, and you can get AI to write captions or do some work for you on that, I don't think that that's a bad thing. Now, if it were an academic class and students are getting graded to write captions, well, no. AI shouldn't be writing your captions because you're getting graded for that and you're learning how to use it. So, I say learn as much as possible about it. I think one of the things that's frustrating about education and technology is some schools just really have absolutes. We cannot use social media on our school computers. We cannot do this. We cannot use AI. And the world's not black and white. Technology exists in a gray zone where you have to use it intelligently and as a good consumer. And so, AI is here to stay. So I think good journalism advisors will use an opportunity to learn as much as they can about it and how it can be used to make them more efficient. But responsibility still has to be the key. So, but I think my biggest concern with AI is, from a journalist perspective, it is a very powerful tool that can be used to mislead people, and that's very frightening. But all in all, I think it's exciting, and it makes me think what the next 5 years is going to bring us in terms of AI, because it just seems like a year or two ago we started hearing about it, and now it's everywhere.
Now, Gary, you're national, and
Yep.
It's probably too soon, but I'm waiting for that school or maybe that yearbook company to
Yep.
somehow put together an AI tool where pretty much you just sort of import your photos and I don't know, put some information in there and you pretty much push one button and poof, it makes the whole book. Have you heard anything? Is anybody even trying that? And is that a good or a personally, I think it's a bad idea, a good or bad idea for somebody to try it? I'm waiting. Somebody's going to try it sometime. What do you think about that kind of scenario?
Well, it's going to get us to where we want to be. Right now, it seems like I can't go to a website, whether it's Google or whatever. If it's a web-based program, I now get a pop-up that wants to do some AI thing for me. Zoom wants to take minutes from the meeting. And, it seems like every site now has this little pop-up AI assistant of some sort. And right now I find those pop-ups irritating and I delete them and just carry on. But I think it's not going to be too long that those are really going to be sophisticated and helpful. And so it's intriguing. It is what it is in the sense that, push a button and make a yearbook. The button doesn't know your school, and that's going to be the challenge there. But the technology is going to evolve, and it's not going to be long before that there is a yearbook application for that. And probably the first couple uses of it are going to be not as sophisticated, but it's going to evolve. And so I want to approach it with an open mind and a little skepticism.
We'll return for one more segment of the Yearbooking Report podcast with Gary Lundgren of NSPA in just a bit. We'll chat especially about student journalism. How does Gary view using TikTok there? And what is the next big thing? That's a question I ask him. So stay tuned for some interesting views coming up in just a moment. All right, here's a simple message to any yearbook advisor and staff. And yet, once again, this is one that often goes missing. Our cardinal rule here at TYR is simply yearbook is supposed to be fun. If it isn't fun, it's time to back up and try again. And again, that's for any level, elementary school to college. But in my 25 plus years, I have seen far too many yearbook staffs treat this great project as a chore. And that's anything but fun. Then people wonder why yearbook kids and staffers just sort of melt away over time. It's not enjoyable. One idea I've stolen, frankly, from somebody else is to appoint a fun editor. Now, for student staffs, that's a kid who's working on the book, but they also have the task of scheduling one fun staff event every week, and that's for a class or just maybe a club. It could be a fun game for 15 minutes, or watching a funny video or two on YouTube. Or my favorite, yes, food. Come on, everybody likes to eat, especially kids. The fun editor handles gathering some snacks and drinks, maybe from a donation once a month. They could reach out to yearbook parents asking for those donations. Or, if you have some yearbook money, use that and just sort of hit the store. Elementary parent groups can use this same idea of a fun editor. Lighten the mood while you're working on the yearbook together. I implore you, please, never let yearbook be a chore. Make it a fun activity that people will then look forward to taking part in. Okay, now let's return for our last segment here with NSPA Director Gary Lundgren on the Yearbooking Report. Let's open this up a little bit, all right, just to student journalism in general. Now, you mentioned NSPA, yearbook, student newspapers, broadcast teams, and so on. Sort of, what's the state of student journalism in America today? And I'm especially thinking about student newspapers, Gary, because again, the newspaper industry has changed so much just in, 15 years or 10 years and so on. It's incredible. The number of newspapers that have just disappeared. Again, in my prior time, the number of student newspapers that have just disappeared, and so on. What do you think? What's the state of, just in basics, student journalism right now? Is it as challenged as the newspaper industry seemingly is, or are they somehow doing better?
Both. Um, at the high school level in particular, some observations over the last probably 20 years is more and more and more high school programs or high schools now have broadcasting programs. Many of them have state-of-the-art broadcast facilities, and um, I think that's outstanding. There's definitely an interest in that. High school newspapers are healthier than you would think, partly because students like to see their work published. It amazes me that your average 16 or 17-year-old today most likely doesn't read a newspaper on a daily basis. Their parents probably don't read a newspaper on a daily basis, but they're passionate about working on the newspaper at their school, which I find really, really interesting. Um, High school news websites are really healthy and really give high school journalists a real life experience because it is possible to cover breaking news when you have a school website. You can get the content up there as fast as you can post it. You can enhance it with video and audio. And so that's a very, very robust tool. So there's a lot of good student journalism going on, and I think it's you know, certainly not going away, and it's really pretty healthy in a lot of schools. I do think nationally, it's a tough time for journalists. I mean, we definitely need to put it out there that when there are phrases like fake news, we are in a world of trouble. Now, keep in mind, there is fake news out there. And so, it's a very challenging time. Journalism really educates us and also leads a dialogue on what's important in our lives. And so I sometimes think that we're in a scary time when there are topics and issues that we really can't discuss anymore just because they're so polarizing in our society. So information is the key. And that's where journalism plays an important role. But journalists really are going through a challenging time where they're not as respected as they should be because, there are phrases out there like fake news or leaders that call out the media at press conferences and they're lying. And so, journalists have to stay the course. And it's a rough time to be a journalist right now. But if we throw in the towel, democracy is at risk. And so, that's why journalism is so important, whether it's at the seventh grade level or the college level, is journalism is essential for a healthy democracy. And that's why it's vital that we keep it alive at all levels. And I hope we look back at this period and go, wow, that was a challenging time, but we came through that storm. And so that's really important. I also think, though, that there's a responsibility that every citizen has to be a very smart consumer of the media. And I think that's where high school and college journalism really helps build that foundation because there are sources out there that aren't reputable. There are sources that come from a very biased perspective. And so as a media consumer, it is so important to know the source of the information you're getting and to be a very, very wise media consumer because just because it's online or in print doesn't mean it's accurate. And so that is probably the biggest change right now is because of social media and technology, you can get inaccurate information out there quickly. And 20 years ago, there was a cost to getting that information out. It had to be printed, it had to be distributed. And so now it's inexpensive to get information out there that's wrong. So I think it's important for everyone just to be aware of the sources that they're looking at. And if you see something online that you think, oh, that can't be true, fact check it, because I think that's really, really important.
All right, now kind of connected with that, Gary, challenges. This is an opinion, okay? There
Okay.
are, I'll say, a decent number of adults who do not see student journalists as journalists. They see them only as students, and a student journalist maybe wants to report on a, I don't know, a controversial topic or something, and all the time, either through you folks or JEA or other groups, I hear about schools where they're trying to like shut things down because somebody's trying to report on a, a touchy, tough subject and so on. First off, what's your thought on that? And around the country, there's something called New Voices legislation,
Yeah.
which is supposed to be protections for student journalists. And it's interesting. I think, Gary, 1/3 of the states have this. That's it, a third. I mean, what do you think about all that when it comes to the, actual student journalists? Oh, they're not doing journalism. Well, yes, they are, and protections for them. What should happen there? What do you think?
Well, I have never heard an educator or a person um, say that a high school soccer player is not a real athlete. So why do we say high school journalists aren't real journalists? I think we have to keep that in perspective. They're learning to be journalists, but the athletes are learning as well. So I think that that's really important to keep in mind. I will say that some administrators and people in the community, their perception of student journalism is shaped by the student journalism they see at their school or their community. And I see plenty of student journalism that I would not call journalism. So there's that. But I think a school really needs to give student journalists an environment to learn their craft, to practice, to learn in much the same way they provide a stage for the drama students, a playing field for the athletes, and support those students and not dismiss them if they want to take on a timely topic. There have been many, many high school journalists that have uncovered pretty significant stories for their community. There was a high school in Iowa 15 years ago that the student journalists at that high school discovered that there were some accomplishments on an incoming principal's resume that were not true. They just simply fact checked this person's resume. And so journalists play an important function, whether they're at a high school or at the New York Times. And sometimes they deliver information that isn't necessarily popular, but it's essential. So I think that, there's some background there. What also in the high school in particular really ties into what is your philosophy about how you run the school? Um, there's the model that the principal is the CEO of that school, and if something goes on, he or she has the final say. Um, and with that approach to things, that line of thinking would be, well, the principal should approve the newspaper, should read all the pages of the yearbook. But that isn't how a school operates. The principal doesn't stand on the sidelines and approve the next play that the football team is going to do. You support the teachers, you support the students, you give them an opportunity to thrive, and then you stand back and let them do that. And yes, they're going to fail. These are teens. Adults fail. School is about success and it's about failure, and you learn from what you do. And so I think, whether it's journalism or whatever part of the school, you need to give students an environment that they can fail and they can succeed. The New Voices Law really, on the states that have adopted that, really give the students the right to publish without prior review by the administration. The Hazelwood case in the 80s took that right away. And in many ways, if I were an administrator, I would want my students to be able to publish without my prior review, because it's their newspaper and it's their yearbook and it's their website. And if I'm an administrator, I would like to be able to say, the students did that. It's their newspaper. I didn't read this before it went to press. That's not my job. And so I think that we need to give the students the right to publish without administrative approval, but we have to educate those students. We have to give those students an advisor that is trained and knows journalism and is supportive, and create an ecosystem there for responsible journalism. So, I'm all about empowering students, and 99% of the time, if you empower students, they do not disappoint you.
Gary, I agree 100%. Right? As we wrap up here now, okay, you mentioned earlier, you mentioned social media, and you mentioned broadcast has grown and so on. I don't know, you kind of put those two together and you get TikTok, okay? Very, very, very popular. And TikTok has a lot of so-called influencers who, personally, in opinion, those are not journalists, all right? They are influencers. But what about either student newspapers or yearbook somehow using TikTok, or should they keep it at arm's length? All right. What do you think about not social media in general, that one in particular? What do you think about that usage?
Well, I'm not one that says never say never and, don't use TikTok. I think it goes like anything else. How are you going to use it? I won't lie. TikTok's ties to China bug me. So I kind of hope that gets worked out. But if you're going to communicate to your audience, you have to go where they go. And so TikTok can be used in a very responsible way. TikTok can be a journalistic platform. It's a tool. So the content you put on TikTok, even though it's a very short little clip, can be responsible and journalistic. So it can be a very powerful tool. The platform, the TikTok website, does not make bad decisions. The people posting the content do. So you can be very responsible and journalistic and entertaining at the same time on TikTok and serve your readers. So I say use that tool in a powerful journalistic way because you got to connect to your readers. And it can also be a very powerful tool to drive them to your website to get more content. So it all comes down to how are you going to use it? And there are some pretty powerful ways to use TikTok. Let's not be afraid of it.
All right, final question, Gary, and this might be an unfair question. We're having some fun here. And again, you're national. You get to see a lot of probably pretty cool stuff. I don't know, when it comes to student journalism, if it's yearbooking or just in general, what's the next big thing? Now, we've talked about TikTok, we've talked about AI, we've talked about some other things there. I don't know, do you see something in the horizon that, hey, watch out for this, or, hey, schools should try using this or something? Just pull out your crystal ball of sorts there. I don't know if you have an opinion. What's the next big thing when it comes to either journalism or student journalism in particular?
I think the next big thing is going to be using the tools we have to continue to better serve our students. The phone is a powerful thing. It's a small little device we have with us. And so I think more and more we see schools putting content online and on their phone, with the full knowledge that students will be looking at it on their phones. So I think that the tools that we have now can be used from a very powerful storytelling perspective. But I do think that in the future, the next great thing is going to use technology and it's going to continue to tell stories in a meaningful way. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see where this takes us. But I think if you just look back on the last 20 years, I mean, I sometimes wonder what my 16-year-old self would have thought of TikTok, So, I think the future, at least with high school journalism, is going to be taking the tools we have and use them to connect with a high school audience in a responsible way. And that's pretty exciting.
Or scary. Maybe. All right. Here's mine. Okay. We didn't have these 20 years ago. I can't imagine what we're going to have 20 years from now. That could be crazy. Well, Gary, I tell you what, we went longer than I anticipated, but I was looking forward to this conversation because you shared a lot of great advice and some background and so on. Just to wrap up, if somebody is interested in NSPA, what do they do? Where do they go? How do they get some information?
I think our website's the best way to begin, and it's at studentpress.org/NSPA. And I would encourage you to go there for two things. There's an archive of great student media on there, and it really shows the good stuff that's going on out there. Plus, it explains our organization and how you can become a member. And it really is kind of a one-stop shop. And I would direct you to go to that website. Probably a secondary step would be, if you're a journalism teacher or advisor, is come to a convention and just check it all out. Like I said before, you don't need to bring 30 students, just come on your own. And I think you'll leave learning a lot and definitely excited. So those two things I would highly recommend.
All right, now we're doing this for August of 2025. Gary, when's the next convention? Like where? I know it's in November. I don't have dates. Where's the next place?
I'm glad you asked. I could look at my calendar. It's mid-November, and we are going to Nashville. And in the spring, in April, we're in Minneapolis. And so two great cities, and we try to move around every year. And, it's been a while since we've been to Nashville. We're at the Gaylord. We were scheduled to go to Nashville, and that convention was canceled because of the pandemic. So it's exciting to go have the convention that never happened.
All right. Gary, again, appreciate your time so much, and good luck to you folks with NSPA, and thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Scott.
A big thank you to Gary Lundgren of NSPA for his advice and insights on how to make that next step from a good to a great yearbook, or just staying at that great level. We hope you got some good ideas, and once again, learn more about NSPA online at studentpress.org/NSPA. Especially for high school, maybe college staffs, give some thought to attending an upcoming JEA NSPA convention event. They're always held in mid-November and in mid-April. If you are really into student journalism or want to be, those 3-day conventions will definitely help get you there. Thousands go. It is really valuable. Go yourself if you can, and if you've got the budget for it, boy, bring your top students, and they will learn a lot and absolutely love it. Thanks again for listening to the Yearbooking Report podcast. I'm Scott Giese. We'll see you next time.